Veteran comic book author Mark Millar has joined us to talk about his upcoming Netflix project, Jupiter's Legacy. If you don't have him in your sights yet, his description of the story can instantly catch your attention. He's the Lord of the Rings for superhero fans. He tells us, Jupiter's Legacy was born as Millar's plan to create the greatest superhero story, something you would have in 20 years of Marvel movies in a single story. The comic, published by Image, began in 2013 and consists of 2 main volumes, plus 2 others that serve as a prequel known as Jupiter's Circle. The story focuses on Sheldon Sampson, also known as the Utopian, played by Josh Duhamel in the Netflix series. It extends from the 1930s to the present. Duhamel explains, I can play this young man, ambitious, naive and vulnerable, who has just gone through a terrible tragedy with his family after seeing his father die in the worst possible way and who undertakes this journey in which he literally loses his head. Love America, Millar adds. And in his dreams he begins to have these hallucinations coming from a strange island that tells him how he can fix the country. Basically, he has to find a place that does not exist and gather a team of friends to accompany him. He is a man obsessed with returning and fixing the country he loves. The structure of Jupiter's Legacy extends for more than 100 years. In the comics, this is divided into 2 stories, one that takes place in a period scenario after the collapse of Wall Street and a second during the present. These were published in 2 volumes counted in chronological order, but for the Netflix series, showrunner Stephen S. DeKnight has altered the structure. DeKnight has merged the 2 books I made into a single story, Millar says. And what it did was include flashbacks and flash-forwards using the Godfather 2 structure where you saw the son's life and the father's life at the same age in parallel, and what was happening to each of them. It gives it an incredible weight. Much of that weight will come with the interpretation of the Utopian as a failed superhero. We move on to 100 years later, where he is this superhero, this type of Superman who has failed, Millar explains. It's a sad story, because the United States is plagued by problems as it was in 1929 and, somehow, with more complicated problems. He is looking at his children and knows that ultimately, they will not fix the world either. He is a man full of optimism at the beginning and a man full of repentance at the end of his life. And that's the story. It's about a superhero who looks back on his life and has failed. While the extensive nature of the 100-year-old story helps fuel that idea of the Lord of the Rings for superhero fans, much of the program's material will focus on personal relationships. In fact, he goes to therapy to find out how to deal with his own daughter, Duhamel says of his character. This is a guy who can fly, who can do almost anything. It is family dysfunction that I think makes it different from anything else that exists in this genre. As far as familiar angles go, Millar sums it up as The Incredibles directed by Martin Scorsese. What would it be like for Superman to try to have children? Millar tells us. That was the basic idea I had when I started Doodles. Superman has always been able to control everything, but when it comes to matters of the heart, it doesn't matter if you can fly or have an X-ray vision. That doesn't make you a perfect father.